And Football Friday during Dallas week. This is the Mac-led Birds 365 pre-Cowboy show. Yeah, we'll get the pregame show right before the game on Sunday, but the last third of the week dedicated purely to your Philadelphia Eagles. McMullen and McDonald here with you for the next 2 hours, and two good guests coming your way. I don't reference this often. The stream, we've got a bunch of loyal streamers who check in, and some who comment on our stream on our feed. And we've gotten 4 to jump in early today. Some jump in before we start. We started pretty damn close to on time today. Jody, would your alarm go late again if we're a minute late? Yeah, I always take my ribbon because that's happened to me a couple of times in 3 years. Here are today's streams. Good morning, guys. Good morning, Bird Gang. Good morning. Morning, Mac and Mac. Morning, Birds fans.
Those aren't bad. Those aren't
pleasantries, Johnny Mac.
How about that?
We don't always get pleasantries on our stream here.
No, that's nice. It's the holiday season. Maybe everybody.
That's what you think it is. You think it's
maybe everybody's taking a positive approach. I don't think it's been like that this week. I've been stunned at the angst and anger from the Eagles fan base. Coming off look, it was a bad game, but I mean, this team has built some equity, put some good stuff in the bank. You would think they'd get a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, but I haven't seen much of that.
I think timeline has a lot to do with it. After the game, yeah, you're going to be mad. Yeah, you're going to be disappointed. Yeah, you might be flat out ticked off with the lack of effort. And the thing that got me most, and I can't deny what the fans said, that the Eagles could not match the intensity of the 49ers. And the 49ers were certainly more intense. I'm not here to tell you, oh, what do you mean? The Eagles played just as well. No, they didn't. But I think it was a talent thing more than it was an intensity thing. People didn't give the 49ers enough credit coming into that game. And there was a little bit, certainly more desperation on the 49ers part because they're 2 games back coming into the game. Yeah. The Eagles had a 2-game lead. So desperation, I thought, would have been a better word to describe it than intensity. But I think just as a general fan base, Eagle Nation, I think they undersold the 49ers coming in. I'm with you here, Johnny Mac. I'm ready to turn back the clock. We've got to put the 49ers to bed. Make another shot at the 49ers somewhere down the road, and it'll be an important game, more important game than week 13 of the NFL regular season. Question is, will it be at the Link again? Are they going to have to go out to the West Coast to beat the 49ers? But we don't need to worry about that. The Eagles just have to take care of their own business this week, and they're going to take it against the Dallas Cowboys. And yeah, here's one thing I would implore all the Eagle fans to do. When you're trying to figure out how good a chance the Eagles have to win this game, don't just concentrate on what they did last Sunday against the 49ers. They've had an entire season. You just said it, John. They put some goodwill in the bank. They were 10-1 coming into that game. They were a weird 10-1 into the fact that there were games that they didn't play great but found a way to win, which I think is more of a good thing than a bad. But now they're 10-2. Don't just look at 0-1 in the last 6 days. They're 10-2 for the season. They have played Dallas already in a weird game again. I was just going through it again, John. It's now a month ago. That last drive that the Cowboys had is so
crazy. It was crazy.
You can't even put that in a perspective. How do you let them get 60 yards in 2 plays with 2 penalties and let them get into a position? They're at the 14-yard line with 40-some seconds to go and no timeouts. And they get to the 6. And then they back up and they're on the 31. It was holy mackerel. It's just the weirdest thing. If you want to go back, if you got a copy of the tape, go back and watch it. If you want to just check it out, go back and check the play-by-play. It just is borderline inexplicable the way that game ended, but it ended with the Eagles winning, right?
Yeah, it did. And it's funny how quickly you forget, because I think the issue in that game was taking the foot off the pedal. The Eagles had that game in control entering the fourth quarter, and I got very, very conservative and they let Dallas come back into it and almost win it. And I think that, if you converse that with this week and the run the ball narrative and all that kind of stuff, you said, well, they tried to do it then and they didn't do it, and they let Dallas back in the game. So it's always, it's always a very micro viewpoint instead of a macro, and it gets worse after a loss, obviously, and especially when you don't run the ball effectively. But there's an example of, we can go back to our tapes on the JAKIB Sports YouTube page, and I bet you we were saying, well, they stopped throwing the ball a little bit too early in that one, letting Dallas get back in the game. So it's funny how that stuff kind of works. But
no, you go back and check the tapes. I guarantee I didn't say that, because I agreed with what Sirianni did. The bigger take would have been if he continued to throw and had 3 and outs with taking no time off the clock. Then it would have been, what the hell was Sirianni thinking? We've got the lead. How do you not run the ball? No, I'll say what Jason Kelsey said this week and John McMullen just said 30 seconds ago. You need to run the ball effectively. It wasn't choice to run the ball. It was the choice to run the ball and not block it up well enough.
Everybody forgets that last. Everybody forgets that last word.
Yes, they do.
Effectively, not run the ball, because they were sort of banging their head against the wall against San Francisco. But yeah, that Dallas game, that Dallas got the ball back maybe with
the last possession,
50 seconds,
42.
Like that.
42 seconds, and no time.
And they were backed up,
at
backed
their 14-yard line.
Yeah, and the drive prior, I know it was Swift, fumble, and they got it back. Luckily, that was the fumble game, and I believe
Tyler Steen's
Tyler Steen, exactly. So they got like 2 yard, 1 yard, and this is like with a minute and a half left. They get 2 yards, 1 yard. Negative play, and they got to punt the football, and they do everything right. They pin him back, but yeah, I mean, if you go for the jugular there, the game's over. So it's always a give and take. Always a give and take.
Yeah, I think you can go for the jugular and believe you can run the ball 3 times and get 10 yards. They didn't, because they didn't run it effectively enough. They didn't block it up well enough. The Cowboys are a good enough defense that if they're 90% sure you're going to run the football, that they can be able to not give up a large enough gain for you to get a first down. They know a first down and the game's over. So they're certainly playing aggressively to try and stop the run, and the Eagles didn't run it well enough. But they ended up winning the game. And that, to me, is a bigger focus point than the San Francisco game going into this game. You played this team. You had this team. You almost lost this game, but you didn't. You held on and won the game. That is something that the Eagles can hang their hat on and build on. That's the upside. Here's the downside. Johnny Mac, the Dallas Cowboys have played 6 home games so far this year. You want to guess how many points they're averaging in those 6 home games?
Like 40-ish. It's in that range.
41.
Yeah.
They're averaging 41 points a game.
Yeah.
Not they had a 41-point game. They're averaging 41 points a game. They have been phenomenal offensively in their own stadium. And there's no reason to think that their offense is going to drop off drastically unless the Eagles come with a big defensive effort. And I think that's possible. Maybe this is wishful thinking on my part, but the only previous loss this season for the Philadelphia Eagles was when they got beat by the Jets in kind of a weird, funky game, which I saw with my own 2 eyes. I still can't quite figure out how the Jets won that game. Jalen Hurts threw a really bad pick late in that game. But they followed that up the next week. See if you agree with me on this one. Their best defensive effort of the entire year was the following week against the Dolphins. Dolphins came in as the greatest show on grass or whatever. They're not the Rams, but the numbers they were putting up offensively, including a 70-burger against the Broncos, were off the chart and potentially record-breaking. The Eagles held them in check. They held them under 250 yards, Johnny Mac.
Yeah.
That for me was their best
Certainly,
offensive effort of the year.
certainly from a opponent standpoint, a talented. I think overall, Tampa Bay was their best defensive game. They were stifled, but that's not nearly as good an offense as Miami. So I get what you're saying. They certainly played well. And those days seem long gone for whatever reason. But I do think, again, people don't, you mentioned not giving enough credit to the 49ers. I thought there was one way they could win that game. And I thought it was a style matchup that favored them. And that's why I picked them. And that was the Eagles' defensive front against the 49ers' offensive line. And they didn't take advantage of it. And once you don't take advantage of it to the point where you and by the way, you don't, they at best played them to a stalemate. At worst, played them to a stalemate. But they needed to be significantly better and affect the game. And once they couldn't, then you got the playmakers against the back end of the Eagles. And that's not going to work. And even though you talked about, and rightfully so, the Cowboys and the 40 points a game at home, they're a different type of offense. They're not going to beat you with, Tony Pollard's a good player. You're not Christian McCaffrey. CD Lamb's a great receiver. I was talking to Eli Ricks about this yesterday, but he's a different type of receiver than Deebo Samuel. He's a better receiver than Deebo Samuel, but he's not taking the ball on a bubble screen and going 50.
Right.
So and Ferguson they had struggled with, but he's not George Kittle, and on and on and on. So down, and they don't have the deep threats like Brandon Ayuk to complement CD Lamb, even though Brandon Cooks is getting a little bit better. So I think it's a more sustainable game for the Eagles back seven. And I use that word to say that, it's more traditional. Like I really think they struggled with the style of the 49ers. And they'll be back to a more traditional style. And I think that will help them.
Well, I think a key guy for the Eagles is going to be Bradley Roby, who did not play in the first matchup between the Cowboys. He was out. And the overmatched replacements that the Eagles were trying to get in there, Eli Ricks and Sidney Brown playing a corner position, slot position, but playing cornerback rather than safety. They just weren't up to the task, and the task is not easy to begin with. Then you factor in at CD Lamb, who they're covering most of the time. They're overmatched. So Bradley Roby, and I need more out of Bradley Roby this week, more than just, well, he's better than the overmatched guys we had in there previously.
But no, he is.
He is. I'm not saying that's not true, but I need more than that. I need him to actually defend a pass. Knock down a pass. It looks like it's going to be complete. Get your hand in on a pass and knock it down on third down and make the Cowboys actually punt. I'd take a pick while you're at it, Bradley, but that's kind of an unfair ask. But just he keeps CD Lamb in front of him and lets him beat him with shorter passes than the others who gave up longer gains to CD Lamb. If that happens, the Eagles might not win the game, John. They need him. I'm not saying great. I'm not saying Pro Bowl level. I'm not saying he has to have a turnover in this game. But if they gave up 191 yards to CD Lamb, just him giving up 148 and going, hey, that's 43 yards less they got last time. That's not good enough. You can't just hold CD Lamb to 143 yards.
I think it kind of depends on, I always use the NBA analogy. It's okay to let somebody score 30 or as long as you limit the other guys, as long as you make them work hard. He's a really good player. He's not, now you don't want him to be at 190, as you said, but you can win a game where it's at 140 if you eliminate everybody else. And I think that's the key to it. And you make them work hard for that 140-ish. Would you prefer to be down you prefer to be down like what they did. You mentioned the Miami game, what they did to Tyreek Hill, who caught a bunch of passes, but I think he ended up with like 90 something yards. That would be nice. But I do think you can win as long as Brandon Cooks isn't getting you, as long as Ferguson, as long as Pollard isn't getting you. So it kind of depends on how things shake out, but they will be better because Roby's better than Ricks and Brown in the slot. I mean, how much better? Yeah, we haven't seen enough of it. We said the same thing about Kevin Byard. I thought it was going to calm down. Now maybe it hasn't calmed down because of the opponents. They played much better teams.
Eagles have had a much tougher schedule. And it
So
gets tough for the Cowboys because they get the Bills and the Dolphins next week.
yeah,
And the Eagles have already beaten the Bills and the Dolphins.
yeah. So, and now they got Shaq Leonard to enter into the mix as well. So I don't think all the turnover has helped either. But maybe it will help by week 17 and week 18. That's the goal for this team. The larger goal, obviously, they want to go places, and to get to where they want to go, they want to win the division, get the number 1 seed, and so how do you get there? I think you got to win one of these 2 games, and it doesn't have to be this one, but you got to win one of these 2 road games at Dallas, at Seattle, and then you got to handle your business against
The final
2 really bad teams, but 3 games. And they should be able to do that. And I do think people are looking at San Francisco, and San Francisco is the best team in the NFL right now. There's no question about it. It's hard to win every single game in this league. And I got this game circled with Seattle. Seattle's playing well. It's in San Francisco.
Did you watch Seattle and Dallas last week?
Yeah, Seattle scored a hell of a lot of points against Dallas. I did not expect that. I did not expect that. They also
gave up a hell of a lot of points.
Well, that's true as well. But they're a good team. They're not a great team. I'm saying they got to bring their A game. Everything's got to work out. Everything's got to be perfect. But if they bring their A game, I do think it's a little bit of a letdown because the 49ers were fired up to come in here. I think even though it's a division game, I'm just saying, circle that game. I think it's going to be closer than people think.
The game I would circle would be the Ravens game. They got Baltimore coming.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Their schedule is not.
That's where San Francisco could.
I think a lot of people say, well, they're just going to win every game. It's hard to do that. I mean, it's just hard to do that. As good as they're playing, they're going to have a bad game in there. They might bring their C game, and they might be good enough to still win it. And that might be this week. But we'll see. Yeah. I wouldn't just say a fait accompli they're not going to lose again. Because guess what? If they're not going to lose again, you're not going to beat them. So,
or the Eagles can run the table, and then they do beat them, at least for home field advantage. When they play again on the field, we got to figure that one out. I did look this up
my predictions, but I don't think the Eagles are going to run the table as a foreshadowing.
Okay. CeeDee Lamb average yards per game for the season, and that includes the 191 that the Eagles let him get, which kind of lifted the high tide raises all boats. 98 yards a game. 140, not good enough, Bradley Roby. If you're here specifically to upgrade the Eagles at the slot cornerback position, you can't give up $140 to CeeDee Lamb. If they do, they're going to lose again.
Well, I would say I got to look at those numbers. What are they? Score 40 points a game? What are they home versus road? You got to look at teams and by the way, probably
his road is better than his home because he's got a 191 spot on the road in Philadelphia.
It's possible, but there's other games on the road. You also got to look at. But guess what? That was unfortunately for the Eagles. That was probably because of circumstance the easiest game of the year for CeeDee Lamb because Eli Ricks and Cindy Brown were playing in the slot.
All right, so you're saying Roby's up to the task. I hope he is. You're making.
I'm not saying he's up to the task. I'm saying he's a hell of a lot better than what they rolled out last time. Is what I'm saying.
All right, and I think he's got to be even more so. Just better than Eli Ricks is not going to get it done, Mr. Roby. All right, quickie timeout. Then we get our Friday guy, Paul Domowitch, Mr. Stat Pack from JAKIBSports.com, contributed 33rd team. Domo next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your